Welcome back to Road Trip Revivals. This is Spotty, the MK1 Fiesta I bought in the Loire Atlantique region of France and road tripped 150 miles back home to Brittany. Now in that video I became stranded by a broken fan belt and I tried a couple of things to make one and it didn't work. But a lot of you commented with really good ideas of how to make a belt in a pinch. So I thought, why not give some of these ideas a go and see what actually works and what doesn't. And maybe it'll help some of you out if you're ever stuck for a belt. Right, these are the items we're going to be working with, and we're going to rate this stuff on how well it works, but also how obtainable it is, because no matter how well it works, it's no good if you can't get hold of it in a pinch. Some of these things I tried on the day, and actually most of this stuff I had with me at the time, but some of it I didn't think of. Firstly, we have got the original broken belt, and these large cable ties, and this is an idea I had later on. These big cable ties, we tried them on their own, but they didn't sit in the V of the pulley and they came off and shredded instantly. But what if we used these cable ties to reinforce the old belt? So that's a thing. Duct tape we had. That might play a part in repairing this, but also duct tape on its own. I don't know, someone suggested it, but I'm not sure. We've got an HT lead. That is quite strong, someone suggested this, but it might be a non-starter because I think by the time you've tied a knot in it, you're going to have a big lump there, and that is not going to pass over the pulleys very well. We've got smaller but stronger cable ties. Will they sit in the V and work? I don't know. I don't think they're strong enough. By far and away the most popular suggestion were these ladies' tights, or men's tights for that matter. I'm not going to judge anyone. Loads and loads of people said this, and it's supposedly tried and tested method, so we'll check those out. We've got the electrical wire. I tried that on the day. It didn't work very well at all. Someone suggested you could use multiple loops of the wire, but I'm not sure. I don't really want to waste the wire. We've got cord multi-usage, multi-use cord, so, well, that should work, shouldn't it, if it's multi-uses. Something I did have on the day, but I didn't think of, someone suggested shoelaces, of course. You've usually got those with you, so that would score well on the availability. A bungee cord, I had this with me on the day, but I didn't think of it, so we'll give that a go. And another thing someone suggested was the pinch method. If you've got a belt that's too long, you grab up the excess, pinch it up, put a cable tie on it. Might get you home in a pinch. And then another last minute addition, an old bicycle inner tube. Quite strong and stretchy, easy to tie a knot in. You're never far from a bicycle, are you? Especially in France, but whether you could wrestle it off a biker, a cyclist, his spare one maybe, perhaps. Whether or not you could obtain the tights, well, that's going to depend on how far you are from a shop that sells them, or your sort of levels of charm and wit that you might obtain them. The HT lead, you'll almost certainly have one. Only question is, will it be long enough? And actually, do you mind running on 3 cylinders? Cable ties, well, there's no excuse for leaving home without cable ties, is there? So you should certainly have those on board. On the day that this original belt snapped, I took it into the parts place and gave it to the chap in there, and he put his vernier across the width of the belt. And he said, oh, that's unusual, it's an 8mm belt. And I said, no, it's a 10mm belt, it's just worn down. And he looked at me completely disbelievingly, probably thought I was mad, I don't know. Anyway, but we're going to try and patch this belt together, as I will now demonstrate with my mastery skills of bodgery. What surprised me most on that day is I was able to drive, I'm not sure how far it was, probably a good 4 or 5 miles, 10 minutes or so with no belt on there. And if you've got a good battery and it's in the daytime, then the alternator will power your coil for ages. But the question is, how far will you go without overheating? And as I was driving, the gauge came up a bit, but it didn't actually get too close to boiling over, I don't think. It'd be interesting to know how far you could go, so that might be something to look at another day. The water will naturally want to circulate thermally, and actually some of the very early cars, some of the first cars, they didn't have a water pump at all. They just relied on the natural thermo-circulation of the water. But I have to say, I think it would work a lot better if you took the thermostat out. So what I'm doing here is I've just taped the belt together where it broke, and there's obviously no strength in that whatsoever, but we're going to use these 10mm wide cable ties to put around the outside of the belt to give it some strength. So the original belt will serve just to keep the thing in place, really. But yeah, I had all these bits with me on the day, so I just didn't think of it till later on. Like lots of good ideas, they come to you when it's too late, don't they? Another thing lots of people mentioned is the temporary belts that you used to be able to buy. And I can remember them when they used to be probably almost in every petrol station. And the ones I remember, they were kind of a blue belt, and it was a V section, obviously, 10mm. Well, you cut it to length, and then the section had a hole in it, and there was like a little double-ended bolt, for want of a better word, and you screwed it together and shoved it on, and off you went. And I did use one once. It was on a generator. Right. That actually, that looks pretty good, you know. I don't know. That's going to work, I think. Right, let's stick it on and try it. Right, it's on there. It was a bit of a struggle because I obviously made it a bit too short, but it looks good actually. It feels good. So I've got the stopwatch ready. We'll start it up and see what happens. Makes a fair bit of noise, but it seems to work pretty good actually. You just hear the sort of clacking as the heavy end of the cable tie. I don't know if it's rubbing on something or... Oh, I think it's rubbing on the water pump housing just there actually. It'll either wear down or it will break the cable tie, I guess. But the water pump's spinning well. The alternator's spinning well. And it broke. Ah, what a shame. I had high hopes for that. Ah, okay. It didn't actually break, it jumped off. I swear it was rubbing. And that, it probably would have rubbed it through there actually, so that's not ideal. But I'm guessing it looks like it jumped off because the bit of tape I used just to hold the ends of the belt together, looks like that came off, and then as this moved, no doubt that just derailed the belt and made it jump off. So yeah, slightly disappointing that one. Okay, on to the next. I think we'll stay on the cable tie theme for a minute, and these are 4.8mm. I didn't have these sort of longish, strongish ones with me on the day. I only had big ones or tiny ones, but these are good ones and they're actually really strong. But the question is, because they're hard, they won't grip very well, and I reckon they'll wear through quite quickly. So there we are, quick and easy to install at least, that one, and it sits fairly neatly in the bottom of the V. So it stands half a chance. It has a bit of purchase on the alternator pulley. seems to be working not too bad actually. It's squeaking a bit, but the alternator and the water pump, they look like they're spinning quite well. The charge light is glowing dimly, so it's charging a bit, but not too convincing. We'll just give it a little rev. We'll do that with each one anyway. And the light does reduce as it gives a rev, so that one is working. Just see how long for. Oh, we're 4 minutes into the test and it's starting to smell a bit, I think, and slip a bit more. So I think failure is near for that one. Right, we're coming up to 10 minutes in. I put a multimeter on there as well and it's 12.6, so it's charging probably just a little bit. The other thing I noticed, if I put the heater on, it is blowing quite hot. So the water is circulating fairly well, I would suggest. We're at the 15-minute mark now and it's still on there. Still charging just a little bit, but I put the cooling fan on because the temperature was getting up there and it's blowing off lots of lovely hot air. So the coolant is circulating well, which is encouraging. I think we'll go for a couple of laps around the block, and if it survives that, we'll call it a success and move on to the next. The temperature gauge is holding steady around a quarter. Well, that's over 25 minutes now and it's still hanging on in there. It's not charging convincingly, but your battery's not going to go flat if you're reading 12 point, just dropped a bit, around 12.5 volts. So I think we'll have to call that a success if it's going to last 25 minutes. That's going to get you to a parts place or get you home or get you off the motorway or get you out of trouble. I present to you Exhibit A, 3 cable ties joined together. That far and away exceeded my expectations. I don't know if the camera can focus on that, but the head of the cable tie is well worn down that way. And the cable tie itself is getting very thin. So we'll call that a brilliant effort. I don't think it would have lasted too much longer looking at the state of it here, but it had worn itself into the shape of the pulley. It's just that when it would have worn fully through the side here, then it would have just detached. But I can still pull on it with a fair bit of force and it doesn't give out. So I can't remember where I bought those cable ties, but they were well worth it. Right, this is our next contestant, the bicycle inner tube. I sort of twisted it to reduce the diameter so it fitted in the V's and tied it on there, and it feels quite good. It feels quite snug and it sits nicely in the V. But I think the problem we're going to have is the knot has ended up quite large and I don't think it's going to pass the tight spot here where the pulley is quite close to the cylinder head. But anyway, let's fire it up and see what happens. I'm not sure exactly what happened. The knot didn't come undone and it didn't tear it on the cylinder head. Right, let's give the inner tube another chance. Rather than knotting it this time, I've overlapped it from here to here and then used 3 cable ties to hold the 2 pieces together, a bit of duct tape where the tails are, and that now has reduced the thickness. So let's see what happens with that. Okay, it didn't break, but it just immediately jumped off again, and I suppose that's because it's twisted. It will always find an edge to pick up on the edge of the pulley, and that just throws it off. I wanted to give the inner tube one more chance, so this time I've cable tied it together again, but I've untwisted it. It sits in the V okay, apart from the section where it joins, so I don't hold much hope for it, but we'll give it a go anyway. We'll have to call the inner tube a fail, unfortunately. If we could find a better way of joining it, I think it would work. So I may or may not come back to that one if I have any other ideas. Right, this is the last ditch attempt for the inner tube, and what I've done this time to join it is I've put one end inside the other end, so it does at least make a nice neat join. So let's give that a whirl. Oh, that's weird, it kind of bunched up somehow. I'm not sure what happened there. But yeah, inner tube, no, that does not work. Next up, the bungee. I did actually have this with me on the day. I didn't think to use it, but I've got high hopes for this one. We've joined it with cable ties and a bit of tape to tidy up the ends. It's plenty strong enough, and it should grip onto the pulleys. But the question is always, is the join going to hold together, and is it going to stay on there? I think I probably could have made it a bit tighter. It doesn't have much purchase on the pulley, but anyway, here we go. This is the problem, isn't it? Anything that has a join that's slightly large, if the pulley, the edge of the pulley rides in the crack here, surely it's going to flick it off. Okay, final attempt for the bungee, I think. I think it's gone already, isn't it? Yeah, I can hear. Well, the bungee was disappointing, wasn't it? It's plenty strong enough, and if there was a way of joining it without having that big lump, I'm sure it would work quite well. It got me thinking about the HT lead, and that will have the same problem because it's about the same diameter. Again, it's plenty strong, but it does make me wonder if we could somehow splice it without overlapping it with a tapered cut and then more cable ties to fix it back together. Maybe that could work. We'll come back to that in a minute. I think next we'll try the shoelace. Don't ask me where these came from. I didn't raid someone's shoes. I found them in the back of my Jeep, and there is a pair, but we only need one. I think one is long enough to get round there. Again, good and strong. A bit of stretch on it, which is desirable, and it's thin enough, I think, that when we tie a knot in it, it will still sit comfortably within the V of the pulley. Nice and easy to install, this one. I just put the alternator in its back position, tied a knot, and then put a little bit of tension on it. Not too much, but there's a bit of tension there. It's got, yeah, not great purchase on the pulleys, but a little bit of purchase. This is quite a thin shoelace, but it does feel strong. So, right, let's see what happens. I have to give the shoelaces another chance because it didn't break, it came untied. So this is take two, and this time I've double knotted it, and I've cheated slightly. I've put a dab of glue on the knots just to try and make sure it doesn't come undone. So far so good for that one. That might work. Poor Spotty, look at the rain. He's getting a soggy bottom. I can almost hear it fizzing. Oh. No. It's gone. What happened? It shredded it. Didn't undo this time, it actually broke the string. Yeah. That's disappointing, isn't it? Right, shoelace. No good. We'll do the multi-use cord next. This is 4mm, and it says on it it's good for 20 kilos, but actually it's way stronger than that. It's more representative, I would say, of kind of like a strong shoelace. I suppose you could use this for shoelace if you want. So we'll get that installed the same way with a knot. And hopefully that'll work a bit better, won't it? Right, that seems to work quite well. I think there's a bit of fraying going on at the edges, but it's running nice and quiet. Water pump and alternator seem to be turning well. I was able to get a fair bit more tension on this than on the shoelace because it's stronger. That looks pretty good so far. We're less than 2 minutes in and it's pretty much dead already actually. The water pump is not turning. It seems it's frayed and stretched. Yeah, that was surprising. I thought that would last a bit longer. I think ultimately it's just too soft. See that? Wow, it's eaten it already. Okay. See what's happened once it's eaten through the red bit. This white bit in the core is not very strong. It's more of like a filler and it's stretchy. And it's the red bit that gives it its strength actually. So once that was eaten through, it was all over. But yeah, less than 2 minutes for that. That is absolutely terrible. It's starting to eat away at the knot well as well. But yeah, well, that's I expected a bit more of that. So that is another fail. So I wanted to try the HT lead next, and I started cutting it at an angle like that, thinking if I cut the other side to the same angle, I could then use a couple of cable ties to join it together, and I'd have a join that didn't have a lumpy bit. But what I realised, even though this looks quite long, that isn't long enough. And I've got a box of maybe 20 or so used ones I've taken off various cars, and none of them are longer than that. So there isn't one long enough. So what I have to conclude is that this is quite a short belt on here, 800mm or so, and you're very, very unlikely to have an HT lead that is going to be long enough. So that is not going to work. I've got the pinch belt here, get you out in a pinch, but that isn't going to work either because the cylinder head is much too close to the water pump pulley, nowhere near enough room for that to go round. On another car, maybe we might test that out another day, perhaps on the Torch Arena, something else. But that for today is not going to get us out of trouble. So that just leaves the tights. Now these are the firm favourite in the comments section. They're quite strong. I feel like I could break it if I really pulled on it. They're plenty long enough. We'll try it just one piece, one leg, but we could double up the legs, I should think, if we need to. It should be quite easy to install, just feed it round and tie it on. I think, being as the way it compresses down, we should end up with a knot that's quite small and not cause us any problems, so let's try that. And similar way to some of the other things, I put the adjustment all the way in, tied them up, and in this case the adjustment's nearly all the way out again to get them at sort of sensible tension. The purchase on the pulley feels medium, but yeah, anyway, I have high hopes for this one based on what people have told me. Charge light is mostly solid, but flickering slightly intermittently with a few revs. What do we get? Yeah, there's a little bit of charge going on. I think that's the most voltage we've seen, 12.9. So that's charging quite well actually. Well, Not well, but better than we've seen. A minute and a half in. Let's see how it goes. Nearly 15 minutes into the tights test and they look just fine. As with the cable tie test, we got this far. I put the cooling fan on and it's blowing off lots of hot air, which means we've got decent coolant circulation. If it lasts for 25 minutes, then we can say that it worked just as well as the cable ties. We can assess the wear and decide that perhaps it's better than the cable ties, might even last longer. Right, we're just coming up to 20 minutes, so we'll do our 2 tours around the block. Charge light is mostly on. It goes off a bit sometimes, it goes in cycles. I must say, I was slightly sceptical of the tights, but all you guys, and there were a lot of you, that said they were the thing, you were absolutely right. And it sounds silly, but I would say that is definitely worth having in your breakdown kit. I'll certainly be keeping a pair in the Road Trip Revival breakdown kit. There you go, 25 minutes. What have we got? Not exactly tight, but it's held its tension reasonably well. In terms of wear, there's got to be honest, there's hardly any. There's one bit where it started to wear a hole there. Yeah, there's a few little holes here and there, but the knot is well frayed, but the knot's not coming undone. It looks, to be honest, like it would probably last another half an hour, maybe even another hour and a half, who knows. But yeah, that is definitely our clear winner of the day. I did consider having another go at this thing, and I realised that I needed the join not to be next to the head of the cable tie, and that way I could wrap a bit more tape to keep these two ends together. But looking at it, and for the few seconds it was on there, it had already started cutting through the duct tape that was there, and without that on there it was just going to fall apart in 2 seconds anyway. So I think we'll scrap that one, say that wasn't going to work. If only I knew where the original proper belt was, I would put it back on. I guess I can put the tights back on.